So the mechanisms deployed in PriFoB are many, but we will just mention the main mechanisms in PriFoB. PriFoB provides the property of global accreditation using the signatures of work consensus algorithm. Actually, this was proposed previously along with the proof of authority, which we also used, but the integration of the two consensus algorithms is a novel approach that we use for different purposes because we have different data saved on chain. So for DIDs, we use the signatures of work, and for other types of data saved on chain, we use the proof of authority. We also use the verifiable credentials as is standardized by the W3C or the World Wide Web Consortium, and we do use the proof of authority to confirm the validity of these credentials, but we don't save them on chain. We also proposed an efficient revoke system using a novel proposal of the distributed ledger used in PriFoB. Usually the blockchain ledger is either linear or DAG based in general, and data, if the ledger was linear, then data is saved linearly, and each block should only have one parent and one child. In a DAG-based, we would have like a graph, a directed acyclic graph, and we proposed actually three-dimensional DAG-based ledger. Using this novel approach, we could actually realize an efficient revoke mechanism using the proof of authority and this 3DDL without the need of saving the credentials on chain. We also use one-way encryption, symmetric encryption, and asymmetric encryption. Those, of course, methods are standardized, but for example, some developers prefer to use elliptic curve instead of RSA, so this can be easily changed. Because again, the project is open source, so you can modify on whatever you want, and those are actually implemented over the libraries, so you can just use the library that suits your application. We also use digital signatures as standardized, and we use zero-knowledge proofs as also standardized. And finally, we proposed the DAG-based 3DDL, as we said. In the first dimension, we save DID blocks. In the second dimension, we save schema blocks. And in the third dimension, we save revocation blocks. Regarding the zero-knowledge proofs, this is actually a verification technique which, using cryptography, allows one substance to prove to another component that it knows a specific data or fulfills a particular requirement without disclosing any actual data that supports that evidence. In PriFoB, each VC or verifiable credential is coupled with a signature, which is the encrypted hash of the issued VC. And this signature is generated using the private key of the issuer and thus can be verified using the DID because the DID includes the public key of the issuer. Now, this signature cannot be forged because no one knows the private key of the issuer, but can be easily verified by any system component. Generally speaking, successful zero-knowledge proofs implies three main criteria. First, we have the completeness, which means that an honest prover can always convince an honest verifier. We have proof of knowledge, which means that a malicious prover not knowing the secret, in this case it's the private key, cannot convince the verifier. So you need to know the private key. And finally, zero knowledge property. That means that an honest verifier that follows the protocol cannot learn any additional information about the secret. The secret in this case is the private key and also the hashed credential. Because once you decrypt the signature, you don't get the credential itself, but the hash of the credential. We also would like to emphasize on the DAG-based 3DDL. Basically, we proposed this in PriFoB with 3 dimensions, as I mentioned. First dimension is for DID blocks, and DID blocks basically can either point to the Genesis block or to other DID blocks specifically. In the schema dimension or in the second dimension, schemas can either point to the DID block of specifically the issuer who issued this schema or who submitted this schema, or those schemas can point to schema blocks generated earlier by this specific issuer. And thirdly, the revoke blocks, which can either point to the schema block that was issued to issue the revoked credential, or to any other revoke blocks within the same dimension, meaning that they can connect to any revoke block that was submitted by the issuer using the same schema for this credential. In our model of the DAG-based DL, or distributed ledger, each child block is pointing specifically to one parent, while each parent block can have several children. Yeah, so several blocks at a given dimension can have several similar index. This is a good point to discuss because usually it is claimed that if you have the same index for several blocks, then that means that we have forks, which is claimed to be insecuring the system or indicates the insecurity of the system. But basically it depends on the application. So since we are not using this model for cryptocurrency application, then this should not be an issue, specifically because blocks are not determined by their index, as in Bitcoin, for example, but they are determined by the attributes within. So it depends on the block itself. For example, the schema, it has a unique signature by the issuer, and it has a unique signature by the miner who accepted or confirmed the block. And of course, it has its own different title because it's a different template for a unique for a different type of credential. So we have a lot of attributes within each block that can uniquely identify this block, even though it has the same index as other blocks. Also, in this case, we don't really care about double spending attack, because if we have the same index in the same dimension, then that means basically that this issuer, for example, has several schemes or several templates that were issued at the same time, and that is not basically a security threat. Now, this is a visual demonstration of the DAG-based 3DDL. On the left, you can see the green node as the Genesis block. Red nodes represent the DID blocks. Blue nodes represent schema blocks, and yellow nodes represent revoke blocks. As we said, each node should have exactly one parent, but can have multiple children. DID blocks can point to either other DID blocks or to the Genesis block. Schema blocks can either point to the DID block they are associated with, or to other schema blocks that were generated by this specific issuer, and similarly for revoke blocks. And of course, we can see that several blocks can have the same index at the same dimension. So this is no problem.